You know, a time loop movie is a bit depressing when you're in lockdown, day after day, stuck in the same house, the same people. Get me out of Palm Springs, now available on Hulu, stars Andy Samberg, Cristin Miloti, and JK Simmons in a Groundhog Day-style story about three people trapped in a single day. Samberg stars as Niles, who meets Sarah, played by Miloti, at her sister's wedding. They get drunk and decide to have a romantic fling in the desert when Samberg gets randomly shot by an arrow. He runs off while a bewildered Sarah follows him. He ends up in a cave with a glowing ball of energy and drags himself into it, while telling Sarah not to follow him in the cave. Of course, this is 2020, so no woman has to listen to no mansplaining, and she goes right in. Sarah wakes the next day, back on the same day. She begins to realize what's happened and goes apeshit on Niles, figuring he knows what's happened. After some exposition and attempts to get out of the loop, including trying to kill herself, doing something altruistic, or just drive far enough away, all of which fail utterly, Sarah finally accepts what Niles already has. Nothing matters anymore. From there, these two start to form a relationship, trying to understand their circumstances and find peace in a world where nothing matters since everything gets reset for them. While Niles has long passed the 5 stages and is reveling in acceptance, Sarah has a harder time getting there. And even when she appears to have finally gotten to acceptance and start a real relationship with Niles, she realizes how she ended up there, and doing bad things really does matter. Niles, on the other hand, begins to realize how lonely he's been and wants nothing more than to spend his life with Sarah, however many eons that might end up being. The time loop story has been done a lot, both in TV and movie. Happy Death Day, anyone? But nowhere has it been done better than the godfather of time loop movies, Groundhog Day. So, comparisons will be inevitable. I think Palm Springs, however, stands out. They get the standard tropes of how to get out of the loop out of the way, as well as the various emotional states that would put on a person. And we've seen all that before. But what we've never seen before is a group of people in a loop together like this. Niles and Sarah, the two we spend the most time with, but also JK Simmons, who plays Roy, a wedding guest Niles got high with on one of the trips through the loop and showed him the cave. Roy was pretty pissed about this and will occasionally come out just to kill Niles. Unlike the other two, he started the day really far away, so he doesn't make the murder trip too often. Sarah is liked by her family, but they're pretty disappointed in her life, as she mostly, at this point, spends her time drinking and screwing. Her words. Living her life like it never mattered, she finally found out what not mattering really meant. Thematically, the loop really works for her character. I like the performances an awful lot as well. Both actors are very watchable, and some nuance into the characters. While Samberg appears to simply not care anymore about life, you can see him subtly awake from his time coma by finally realizing that there are some consequences to his choices, because what he does is remembered by Sarah. At one point during a lighter moment, Sarah innocently asks him what he did before this happened, and he realizes he can't remember. Niles has completely deadened himself to feeling anything, and yet that realization shakes him. Samberg does a fine job of putting a ton of mixed emotions and then attempting to tamp them all down. Sarah has her own issues, and much of it gets revealed later in the movie, so I won't spoil the ending. The time loop itself is presented as a scientific problem, and I'm not really sure I like that. While they came up with some techno bullshit solution to get out, it really wasn't that important to the story. I think they could have done something like Groundhog Day, where getting out is learning a lesson. I don't know. I had trouble believing Sarah could have figured it out using the time loop to study advanced quantum mechanics, but you weren't going to have the man save the day. Women can do anything if they just put their minds to it, even quantum multi-universes. It's little minor SJW crap that is so small and really seems so important that really irritate me about movies. Personally, I don't think either of these two could have put their brains together to figure out how to fix a car, but sure, quantum multiverses, no big deal. They have YouTube after all. They really did all this to figure out how to help Roy as well, and since I'm not smart enough to come up with a better solution, I'll give them a pass. The one thing I'm not sure I liked, or didn't like really, is the way they interacted with the world. With Bill Murray, he was alone in his loop, so he was forced to interact with the town, even if what he did made no difference. He had to figure out how to make a difference in the world, in the girl, and in himself. In Palm Springs, it occasionally starts to get that holodeck quality to the world. The rest of the characters are just NPCs in this game they're playing. Given the nature of the story of having more people in the loop, I suppose that's inevitable. But if part of the theme is that nihilism is a bad attitude and you should always try to matter because other people matter, then the other people in the story should have had more depth. I should have cared about them more, but I just didn't. Then again, it was a more personal story, a way to take the rom-com and put a little twist to it. I did appreciate that they didn't bang us over the head by repeating scenes over and over and over again, but just slightly different. They're in a loop. We got it. Move on with the story. And that's what they did, and they kept the pacing going nicely. So overall, I give it 4 stars. I was entertained the whole way through, and the performances really elevated it. It isn't an instant classic, but it's certainly solid enough to recommend.